Isaac and his mother lived alone in a small house on a hill. Isaac kept to himself, drawing pictures and playing with his toys as his mom watched Christian broadcasts on the television. Life was simple, and they were both happy. That was until the day Isaac's mom heard a voice from above. "Your son has become corrupted by sin. He needs to be saved." "I will do my best to save him, my lord," Isaac's mother replied, rushing into Isaac's room, removing all that was evil from his life. Again, the voice called to her. "Isaac's soul is still corrupt. He needs to be cut off from all that is evil in this world and confess his sins." "I will follow your instructions, Lord. I have faith in thee," Isaac's mother replied, as she locked Isaac in his room, away from the evils of the world. One last time, Isaac's mom heard the voice of God calling to her. "You've done as I've asked, but I still question your devotion to me. To prove your faith, I will ask one more thing of you." "Yes, Lord, anything," Isaac's mother begged. "To prove your love and devotion, I require a sacrifice. Your son Isaac will be this sacrifice. Go into his room and end his life as an offering to me to prove you love me above all else." "Yes, Lord," she replied, grabbing a butcher's knife from the kitchen. Isaac, watching through a crack in his door, trembled in fear. Scrambling around his room to find a hiding place, he noticed a trapdoor to the basement hidden under his rug. Without hesitation, he flung open the hatch, just as his mother burst through his door and threw himself down into the unknown depths below.
The Binding of Isaac is a roguelike game where the player controls a young boy named Isaac, who is running away from his mother intent on killing him. If you want a more detailed explanation of the reasoning behind this, refer back to the intro displayed before this. The player explores a procedurally generated dungeon beneath Isaac's house, encountering grotesque monsters and environments, while trying to defeat and escape Isaac's mom. In this game, the stakes are incredibly high, in that death is permanent and no playthrough is ever the same. You are unable to save and reload your game after death, so survival is pertinent in completing the game. This causes some extremely anxiety-provoking experiences. This game is often lumped with the survival horror genre, but does not really provoke fear in the player, with the strongest reaction elicited from the player more often than not being anxiety. So, what causes the masses to consider this part of the horror genre, or at least horror adjacent? Possibly the many tropes of the horror genre that the game exemplifies, such as a locale in disrepair, the gloomy atmosphere, horrifying and grotesque supernatural beings, and the corruption of nature. The Binding of Isaac makes frequent use of body horror, an element most commonly found in horror cinema. Body horror can be defined as the manipulation and warping of the normal state of the human bodily form and its functions, and furthermore exemplifies a complete disregard for the human form. This trope is often used in horror because it provokes a feeling of revulsion and discomfort in its audiences. This is based on a deep biological response. This response is based on the idea of species, which are interbreeding individuals that can produce fertile offspring. Body horror often involves metamorphoses, mutations, etc., which warp a being so it no longer conforms to the confines of what is considered normal anatomy or function in a species. Body horror often violates our inherent drive, which is to be reproductively successful, because most mutated or transformed beings are invalid, undesirable as a mate, or not healthy. This uncertainty of what will be produced is what causes fear among us. This relates to the Binding of Isaac because Isaac, or in this case I played through as Samson, but I'll continue to use Isaac when referring to the playable character. He encounters numerous beings which exemplify body horror, but moreover, Isaac himself epitomizes these characteristics. Noel Carroll asserts that creatures that are categorically interstitial, contradictory, incomplete, or formless are an example of the impure. And as you progress through the game, Isaac becomes this definition. He becomes the embodiment of body horror through the items he picks up. Each of these items simultaneously makes Isaac stronger yet more grotesque. One of the items pictured here in the second clip after the intro is called toothpicks. This item is literally toothpicks, which Isaac sticks in his eyelids in order to make his tears more powerful and faster, his tears being his main weapon. These items, which Isaac comes across in the dungeons, mutate Isaac's form and continually stack on top of one another, making the initial boy an unrecognizable monster when nearing the end of the playthrough. I place a small thumbnail of Samson in his original form in the bottom left corner of the screen, so it's easy to see how much his form has warped in the final floors of the game. The use of these items is pertinent in Isaac's survival in these dungeons, so we as players facilitate Isaac's own corruption. Corruption is often present in survival horror video games in many forms, such as corruption of nature, architecture, and authority. Body horror epitomizing the corruption of nature. Because we are in control of Isaac's disturbance of the natural order, we do not have the same reaction of fear, nausea, and disgust like one would in Resident Evil when confronted with a zombie. This is because of the phenomenon known as the gamerly uncanny, where gamers are personally invested in the character that they control. Because of this, Isaac is the character in which we have a predisposition to sympathize with. So in order to facilitate his survival, we use the items which corrupt his form more and more as we progress through the game. Yet we do not fear Isaac as he progresses through the dungeons and becomes more and more monstrous at our hands. This is because we are in control of Isaac's being. Therefore, his corruption does not even register in our minds as we play through the game. A further requirement for fear and horror is lack of control, and because we control Isaac's character, we don't have to fear him in the ways that we'd fear other monsters that had the same characteristics as Isaac. One may question why, as players, we are not moved to fear by the other beings present in the game, because they also exemplify a disturbance in nature, or body horror. This is because the most grotesque and mutated form is Isaac, the character in which we control. Isaac is the most impure and threatening being, and as we are controlling him, we are embodying his corruption. Even though we as players are confronted with these aberrations of nature, we are not fearful because we are worse. Noel Carroll states that a requirement for someone to be horrified is the presence of fear and disgust, but as players, we can't fear ourselves. We play the monster, and as quoted by Anne Gerslev, the monster is the monstrous body, not the monstrous character. Because of the Binding of Isaac's use of body horror and subsequently the corruption of nature, along with many of the game's other characteristics, it is often considered to be part of the survival horror genre. Even though the player does not experience horror in the game like other games such as Resident Evil, the aesthetic and concepts behind the game allow it to be considered so. Furthermore, the player does not experience the same fear and disgust present in many horror video games because the chief monster in the game is Isaac. The randomness of The Binding of Isaac, due to its procedural generation, separates it from other games of the genre, such as Resident Evil and The Witch's House. This is because one playthrough of the game will never be the same as the next. While in the games previously mentioned, once the narrative is known along with the events Subsequent playthroughs of the game lose their horror elements, and the games are no longer entertaining. This is because you know what to expect, and the fear of the unknown is ruined. While in The Binding of Isaac, the unknown is a given.